that actually builds community. It builds health. It provides sustenance for people instead of having to eat gas station chips that are way overpriced. They could actually consume something good for themselves. Like if we really wanted to help people, if the government really wanted to help people, if people in charge really wanted to help people, they would teach them to grow food. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Roots and Dirt podcast.
Editing Letta here. I had forgotten to record the intro to part 2 of growing a year's worth of food. So this is your welcome. I'm excited for you to listen in to this part of the video.
Do you need a substantial amount of land to grow a large amount of food for your family? And the simple answer is absolutely not. You really, truly do not. We originally started growing our food in our backyard, right? And that garden started really small with just a handful of plants, and it expanded from there. But it was a standard, typical size suburban backyard. And the reason why we could grow a lot of food back there was because we had turned the whole backyard into a garden. But I didn't miss having a backyard that our kids could play in and things like that, because we created a space with our garden that was enjoyable to be in, right? We had a massive vegetable garden. It felt massive. Now I know what larger is, right? But back then it was about 14 feet wide by about 50 feet long. So it wasn't massive by any standard, but it was a okay sized garden, right? But we had a sandbox back there, a big round sandbox, probably 8 feet across within our backyard that our kids filled with water, flooded out and played in all the time. We built a corn maze with the corn that we grew, right? Or a corn hideout. It wasn't really a maze, but I made a space in the middle where I didn't plant any corn, and our little kids would run back there, and it was so fun to play in the jungle, right? And make a space that is enjoyable for your family. Don't be so particular about growing the food that you forget to make it a space that is incredible to be in. We still had a patio back there that we could barbecue on and enjoy the fire around, things like that. And I planted a lot of flowers. I still plant a ton of flowers every single year because they're beautiful. They increase your harvest and they make the space beautiful to be in. So no, you don't need a ton of land to grow a large amount of food. Think back to World War I and World War II, right? The government back then had ordered people to plant victory gardens, to take out your flower gardens and plant vegetables instead. And they did. And that ultimately won the war because they couldn't be starved out. So anyone that tells you that everybody growing a little bit of food, if you really wanted to make a difference in the inner city or in like where we live in a food desert. Out here it's weird because I live in big ag country, right? There's just a massive amount of food, and yet there's not much food, right? Here everything is shipped in. People grow corn, soy, maybe some dried beans, wheat. They grow things, right? But there isn't the abundance that there is other places. And so if everybody just planted their own food, you would be so much better off. If in an inner city you tore down a blighted house, something that has just been run down and condemned, you rip that down and turn it into a community garden space, or plant rooftop gardens, things like that. Like that actually builds community. It builds health. It provides sustenance for people instead of having to eat gas station chips that are way overpriced. They could actually consume something good for themselves. Like if we really wanted to help people, if the government really wanted to help people, if people in charge really wanted to help people, they would teach them to grow food. So what do you do if your spouse isn't on board? Because this is something that comes up quite often, right? Like my spouse doesn't want to garden. He's not willing to rip up the backyard, whatever it might be. Well, start somewhere. Make your bread from scratch. Learn to cook from scratch. You can go to a farmer's market and buy a large quantity of tomatoes or different things, reach out to a local farmer, a local grower, and buy in bulk from them and can that up yourself. There's so much that you can do without growing it yourself, I don't grow my own wheat. I don't produce my own sugar. I'm not growing oats and things like that, right? But I'm learning and finding where to source those, purchase them in bulk, and provide them for our family. And if you're faithful in little, if you do the little things now, if you learn those things now, your spouse will come around most likely eventually. They're going to see the benefit. They're going to see the health benefits that brings to your family. Health benefits brings savings, right? You're going to spend the money somewhere. Either you're going to spend it on good quality food or you're going to spend it at the doctor's office. Take your pick, right? And then I would talk to your spouse and ask them why, truly inquire what reservations they have about that, because they might have some legitimate concerns, right? Like maybe you're overextended the way it is and you don't have time for that. Maybe there's something else. Maybe the budget doesn't allow for it. Well, then get creative, right? Gardening is not that expensive. People make it expensive because they add all of these extra unnecessary things into it, and it can be so inexpensive. So I would say it doesn't matter if your spouse is on board or not. There's so much that you can do before they ever jump on board. And then out of your obedience to your family, in building those things up without that help of a garden or the added work of a garden, you can be diligent in those small things. The last thing that you really want to do if you actually want to plant a year's worth of food for your family or attempt to grow as much as you possibly can is you have to learn to eat seasonally. You can't grow all this food and hope to eat through the year if you're not willing to eat what's available, right? If you grow a lot of beets and carrots and winter squash and onions, cabbage and things like that, and then you go to the store and you buy lettuce and cucumbers and peppers or whatever in the middle of winter as fresh veggies, well, that's not really helping your budget at all, is it? Then at that point, it's kind of pointless to have grown all of that produce and it's just going to go to waste. So you need to learn to eat seasonally. When asparagus season comes around, we gorge ourselves on asparagus. We eat tons and tons of asparagus, right? And then when strawberry season comes around, we're no longer eating asparagus. We're eating tons and tons of strawberries. Obviously, we're eating other things besides asparagus and strawberries, but you understand the point, right? In the wintertime, we're eating a lot of winter squash and potatoes and onions, things like that, right? That store for a long time. We're eating a lot of tomato-based products, things that we've put up that way for ourselves. And we feel good. We feel fantastic. When you think varied diet, think a seasonal diet. You're getting all of those nutrients when your body needs them. And then in the spring, you'll be craving all those fresh vegetables again, right? Even though you were still eating fresh vegetables in the winter. But you were just eating different fresh vegetables. You're not eating the leafy greens and things like that, right? And so these are all things to consider if you're hoping to put up a year's worth of produce. And then know that it's very hard to actually achieve a year's worth of produce. We still buy fruit from the store. We do still buy leafy greens and things like that occasionally. But it's important to look at it from a realistic standpoint and know that anything is better than nothing, right? I hope your gardens are growing well or that you're looking forward to starting yours. Let me know in the comments down below what you're looking forward most to growing this year, or if you have any questions that we should do another episode on. Thanks for joining me for the Roots and Dirt podcast.